When you pull into a drive-thru line at a global fast food franchise, you're buying into a very specific illusion of absolute engineered predictability. The entire multi-billion-dollar business model of these restaurant chains relies entirely on the guarantee that a customer in Sydney will experience the exact same flavor profile, temperature, and safety standards as someone in, say, London or New York. This consistency is achieved through incredibly rigid operational manuals, standardized supply chains, and highly automated cooking processes, all specifically designed to completely remove human error from the equation. We hand over our money with the implicit trust that these massive corporations have airtight hygiene protocols safeguarding our health, assuming that the sheer scale of their operations guarantees a level of professionalism that prevents catastrophic mistakes from ever reaching our tray. But behind the bright neon signs, the multi-million-dollar marketing campaigns, and the polished corporate imagery, these restaurants are ultimately operated by adults alongside with many teenagers working in high-stress, low-wage environments. The pressure to meet strict corporate targets for service speed and food cost often collides violently with the required health and safety protocols. When those protocols break down, the consequences stretch far beyond a subpar customer experience or a cold side dish, potentially leading to biologically devastating outcomes. And unfortunately, in October of 2005, all of this led to an incident that occurred at a KFC in the western suburbs of Sydney. A family purchased a standard menu item that led to a nightmare that left a 7-year-old girl with permanent brain damage. This tragedy sparked a brutal, multi-year legal war that fully exposed the dark operational realities hidden behind the counter of one of the world's most recognizable brands. By 1968, KFC had firmly established itself as a dominant force across Australia, but maintaining that lucrative position required fending off constant assaults from McDonald's and an endless sea of local independent takeaway shops. This intense competition meant that corporate strategy shifted away from simply offering a unique product and focused heavily on extreme operational efficiency. A top metric for the entire fast food industry is something called speed of service. In a business model built completely on volume, moving a customer from the speaker box to the pickup window quickly is the ultimate measure of success for any franchise. If those drive-through timers start to slip, the financial consequences are immediate. The analytics firm OpenEye highlights this exact pressure, noting slow speed of service can seriously impact the reputation of a restaurant. Even if the price is good and the quality of the food is high, speed can quickly sway the opinions of restaurant patrons. This pressures store managers to keep transaction times as low as humanly possible, even when unexpected rushes hit and they only have a skeleton crew of young workers on the clock. But forcing that kind of extreme throughput creates a highly dangerous operational squeeze. As OpenEye explicitly warns quick service operators, quote, "If food is taking a significant amount of time to make and bring out to patrons, you and your employees will be unable to attend to other needs around the restaurant, such as keeping your workplace clean and safe to cook in." This high-pressure environment formed the backdrop for the KFC franchise located in Villawood in New South Wales. Operating as a high-traffic suburban store dealing with significant daily sales volumes, the relentless drive to push orders out the window steadily eroded fundamental hygiene practices. The staff systematically prioritized speed over sanitation, creating a chaotic environment where wiping down preparation stations, changing dirty gloves, and properly discarding dropped ingredients were routinely sacrificed just to clear the mounting queue. But before we talk about the incident, we need to talk about the Twister. Introduced as a massive commercial hit in the early 2000s, the Twister was heavily marketed as the ultimate convenient, portable meal. It was designed specifically for busy families, commuters, and people needing a quick lunch on the go. The concept was entirely straightforward, consisting of crispy fried chicken strips, fresh lettuce, diced tomato, and a signature pepper mayonnaise sauce, all tightly bundled inside a warm, toasted tortilla. It offered the classic, recognizable flavor profile of the brand without the messy inconvenience of eating chicken straight off the bone. While the recipe sounds simple enough, The actual physical assembly of a twister on the shop floor requires a significantly higher level of human interaction than almost anything else on the menu. The twister demands a dedicated preparation station and a multi-step manual process. A worker has to physically handle the tortilla to warm it, manually layer the fresh produce in the sauce, carefully position the hot chicken strips, and then use both hands to tightly roll and wrap the final product before sliding it into its branded cardboard sleeve. This intensive, hands-on process is exactly where the operational logistics become incredibly dangerous if the kitchen culture is compromised. Every single point of physical contact during that assembly phase represents a potential vector for cross-contamination. Raw poultry naturally harbors harmful, aggressive bacteria, and to manage this risk, corporate safety manuals dictate extremely strict procedures regarding rigorous hand washing, the mandatory physical separation of raw and cooked preparation areas, and the constant changing of disposable gloves. If a staff member touches raw chicken at the breading station and then rushes over to help clear a backlog of twister orders without executing those critical hygiene steps, the fresh ingredients are immediately compromised. The lettuce, the tomatoes, and the tortilla itself offer a perfect environment for bacteria to transfer and thrive undisturbed, as those ingredients aren't cooked again before reaching the customer. All of those factors led to the infamous incidents at the Villawood store on the afternoon of October 24th, 2005. Amanwi Al-Saman walked into the franchise to purchase a quick and easy dinner for his family, ordering a selection of items that included a twister wrap. He brought the food back to their home, where it was shared casually among his wife, his son, and his 7-year-old daughter, Monica. It was an entirely unremarkable evening. But within a matter of days, the entire household began exhibiting severe symptoms of gastrointestinal distress. The parents and the son suffered intensely through the initial onset of the illness, but their immune systems eventually managed to fight off the infection. Monica, however, was unable to combat the bacteria. Her young body was quickly overwhelmed, and her condition deteriorated at a terrifying speed. What initially appeared to be standard food poisoning rapidly escalated into a profound, life-threatening neurological crisis that left her doctors scrambling for answers. The medical diagnosis confirmed that Monica had contracted Salmonella enterica, but while most strains of Salmonella remained confined to the digestive tract and passed through the system within a week, Monica's case was incredibly rare and severe. The bacteria managed to breach her intestinal wall and enter her bloodstream, triggering a cascading medical emergency that included blood poisoning and septic shock. From the bloodstream, the infection successfully crossed the blood-brain barrier and caused a devastating condition known as Salmonella encephalopathy. This specific complication caused massive, unchecked swelling within Monica's brain, severely and irreversibly damaging her entire neurological system. The crisis plunged the 7-year-old girl into a deep coma that lasted for 6 agonizing months while her family waited helplessly by her hospital bed. When she finally regained consciousness, she was completely changed, diagnosed with spastic quadriplegia and severe cognitive, motor, and speech impairment. She was left permanently unable to walk, talk, or care for herself in any capacity, and she required a feeding tube for basic nutrition and mandated 24-hour medical supervision for the remainder of her life. When doctors confirmed the diagnosis, they looked at the standard incubation period for the bacteria, which perfectly aligned with the afternoon of October 24th. The only major shared meal that fit that window was the KFC order. However, knowing the source of the infection did nothing to stop the immediate and crushing financial weight crashing down on the Saman household. Their standard suburban home was completely unequipped to safely house a growing child diagnosed with spastic quadriplegia. They were forced to completely retrofit their living space, widening doorways to accommodate specialized motorized wheelchairs and entirely gutting their bathrooms to install medical-grade hoists and specialized bathing equipment. Their standard family vehicle had to be urgently replaced with a custom-fitted transport van capable of securely handling heavy wheelchairs and portable medical devices. Beyond those massive initial lifestyle infrastructure changes, the ongoing daily costs were devastating for a regular working class family. Monica required continuous monitoring from specialized nursing staff to manage her condition safely, alongside heavy physical therapy sessions designed to prevent her muscles from completely dying. She also needed a constant, uninterrupted supply of specialized liquid nutrition for her feeding tube. Emmanuel and his wife had no significant savings to draw upon, and they quickly realized that supporting these lifelong medical requirements was entirely impossible on their own. The sheer scale of the financial burden meant they were staring down the barrel of total bankruptcy just to keep their daughter comfortable and alive. The family recognized that their only viable option for long-term survival was to launch a massive civil lawsuit against KFC. Their objective was to secure the financial compensation required to fund Monica's care for the rest of her projected life, effectively shifting the financial burden onto the corporation responsible for their daughter's condition. But launching the lawsuit was just the beginning. Winning a food poisoning case is incredibly hard. The average person eats dozens of different things in a week, giving defense lawyers plenty of room to create doubt. The family's legal team had to establish an absolute, undeniable link between that specific twister wrap and the exact bacteria that harmed Monica. The family also had to prove negligence. It wasn't enough just to show the chicken was contaminated. The lawyers had to legally prove that the restaurant was operating in a dangerously unsafe way. They needed to bypass all the polished PR statements about global safety standards and expose exactly what was happening inside that Villawood kitchen during the dinner rush in October 2005. Meanwhile, KFC immediately began building an impenetrable legal fortress around their brand. Facing a massive financial liability and a catastrophic blow to their global reputation, the corporation refused to simply accept liability and quietly settle the matter out of court. They chose instead to fight the Saman family at every possible juncture, mounting a highly aggressive and deeply analytical legal defense. Their overarching strategy was designed to introduce complex layers of statistical and logistical doubt regarding the true source of the salmonella infection, essentially arguing that the connection between the twister wrap and Monica's brain damage was entirely circumstantial and legally insufficient to warrant a multi-million-dollar payout. The cornerstone of this corporate defense relied heavily on the sheer volume of their daily sales. KFC's lawyers presented extensive data indicating that no chicken twisters were sold on October 24th. They argued that if the Villawood kitchen was truly harboring a highly aggressive salmonella outbreak, there would have been a highly noticeable cluster of hospitalizations across the entire area. They heavily implied that because nobody else reported contracting salmonella from that store on that specific day, the bacteria must have inevitably been introduced from an entirely different source. Building on that narrative of doubt, the defense lawyers actively shifted the spotlight away from the commercial kitchen and pointed it directly at the Saman family's own home. They introduced the possibility that the devastating bacteria could have easily originated from food prepared within their own domestic environment, perhaps resulting from cross-contamination on a household cutting board or from groceries purchased elsewhere. To reinforce these arguments, the corporation utilized a roster of expert medical witnesses to debate the highly specific incubation periods of the bacteria. These experts attempted to prove that the exact hours between the consumption of the twister and the initial onset of the severe symptoms didn't align perfectly with standard medical models. The corporation poured immense financial resources into analyzing every single variable of the case, with their ultimate objective being to prove that the plaintiffs couldn't conclusively eliminate all other potential sources of the infection in the surrounding world. But their strategy began to crumble the moment the trial commenced in the New South Wales Supreme Court in 2012. To prove their case, the plaintiffs called upon the former floor staff who had actually operated the fryers and assembled the meals during the exact period the Saman family visited the store. As these young former employees took the stand, they delivered a series of sworn accounts that systematically dismantled the corporation's claims of rigorous health and safety compliance. The court listened to detailed, granular descriptions of a kitchen environment where fundamental hygiene was routinely sacrificed just to maintain the required speed of service. Workers openly admitted to moving directly from the raw poultry preparation areas to the cooked food assembly lines without bothering to wash their hands or swap out their contaminated gloves. They described a claustrophobic workspace where raw chicken residue and cooked ingredients frequently mixed, confirming that cross-contamination was a regular byproduct of severe understaffing and the relentless management pressure to clear the order queue. The most damning revelations emerged when the testimony shifted to the treatment of inventory during the frantic dinner rush. Former staff members testified under oath that it was a casually accepted practice for cooked chicken that had accidentally been dropped on the greasy kitchen floor to simply be picked up, dusted off, and placed right back into the heated display cabinets for sale to the public. Faced with this undeniable evidence of operational chaos, Justice Stephen Rothman was tasked with bringing the full weight of the law down on the situation. In the Australian civil justice system, the success of a lawsuit of this magnitude rests on what's known as the balance of probabilities. The Saman family's legal team simply needed to demonstrate that it was more likely than not that the twister purchased at the Villawood location directly caused the bacterial infection. Justice Rothman ultimately dismantled the KFC defense strategy piece by piece, finding the sworn accounts of the former floor staff to be highly credible and deeply alarming. He directly addressed the corporation's primary arguments regarding the complete lack of a wider local outbreak, noting that the specific nature of salmonella contamination doesn't strictly require an entire delivery batch of raw poultry to be infected. Given the frantic preparation practices described by the workers, it was entirely plausible that a single piece of chicken or a specific handful of lettuce could become severely contaminated through a dirty glove or direct contact with the floor, while the surrounding ingredients in the kitchen remained relatively safe. He also flatly dismissed the corporate attempt to weaponize the varying severity of the family's symptoms. Justice Rothman noted that Monica's catastrophic neurological reaction compared to the recovery of her parents was simply a tragic consequence of her young age and highly vulnerable immune system, rather than an indication of a different biological source originating from outside the restaurant. The final ruling delivered by the court stated unequivocally that the conduct of the employees at the Villawood store demonstrated a clear systemic breach of the fundamental duty of care owed to every paying customer. He found that the local management team failed completely to enforce mandatory safety protocols, actively allowing a highly dangerous workplace culture to thrive simply to satisfy the relentless corporate pursuit of faster drive-through service times. In April 2012, the Supreme Court ordered KFC to pay the Saman family $8 million in compensation, while also forcing the corporation to cover the family's extensive legal costs. Immediately following the Supreme Court ruling, the company released this statement. "We believe the evidence showed KFC did not cause this tragedy, and after reviewing the judgment and seeking further advice from our lawyers, we have decided to appeal Justice Rothman's decision. We feel deeply for Monica and the Saman family, however, we also have a responsibility to defend KFC's reputation as a provider of safe, high-quality food. As a multinational fast food conglomerate, KFC operates under the constant looming threat of consumer litigation, and their entire business model relies on limiting liability at the individual store level. From the perspective of the boardroom executives, passively accepting an $8 million liability for food poisoning risked opening the floodgates for future lawsuits across the entire global network. They ultimately decided that defending the brand's legal immunity and protecting the broader franchise structure was vastly more important than managing the disastrous public optics of fighting a severely disabled child in an open courtroom. The appellate process dragged the Saman family back into the legal system and forced them to wait even longer for the funds desperately needed for Monica's care. KFC's legal team approached the New South Wales Court of Appeal, essentially repeating their initial arguments. They claimed the original trial judge erred in his assessment of the evidence and argued once again that the link between the chicken and the brain damage was too tenuous. They even sought an order that the Saman family pay the KFC legal costs. The appellate court dismantled these arguments for a second time with Justice Clifton Hoban heavily criticizing the corporate legal strategy as a mere restatement of their failed trial arguments. He famously remarked that their case didn't come within a bull's roar of complying with the rules of an appeal. With the appeal officially dismissed, KFC was forced to transfer the funds and cover the escalating legal costs for both parties. That multi-million-dollar check closed the legal battle, but the broader, devastating cost to the company's brand equity was only just beginning to materialize across the Australian market. For 7 years, the public had watched a multinational juggernaut deploy its vast financial resources to aggressively fight a severely brain-damaged child in open court. By choosing to drag the litigation out and repeatedly forcing the gritty, unsanitary details of their kitchen operations into the continuous national news cycle, the company permanently linked its famous red and white branding to one of the most tragic consumer safety failures in the country's history. The shockwaves of this highly publicized defeat extended far beyond a single corporation. Competitors across the industry quickly realized that the traditional legal shield of claiming to follow standard operating procedures was no longer impenetrable in the face of ground-level employee testimony. The sweeping Supreme Court loss forced corporate boards at rival chains to quietly initiate massive, urgent internal audits of their own hygiene practices. They suddenly recognized that prioritizing drive-through timer metrics and minimizing labor costs at the expense of basic sanitation could easily result in catastrophic multi-million-dollar liabilities. Almost overnight, the Villawood case transformed into a mandatory textbook study in corporate negligence, fundamentally shifting how food safety legislation was interpreted and enforced across the nation's commercial kitchens. Ultimately, the most enduring legacy of the Villawood incident highlights the terrifying inherent asymmetry of power between a global corporation and the everyday consumer. The entire modern fast food business model relies heavily on the customer surrendering total control over their food preparation. We pull up to the window and operate on the implicit trust that a globally recognized logo serves as an ironclad guarantee of safety and professionalism. When that implicit contract is violently broken, the corporation immediately retreats behind impenetrable walls of high-priced legal teams, maneuvering to reduce a devastating human tragedy into a manageable balance sheet liability. Monica Saman's story serves as a permanent and tragic testament to exactly what happens when the relentless industrial pursuit of speed completely overtakes basic human safety on the assembly line. But what do you think? Did KFC make a calculated, cold-blooded legal decision to protect themselves from future lawsuits? Or was their refusal to accept responsibility a massive public relations failure? Also, does knowing the gritty reality of fast food kitchens change your perspective on drive-through convenience? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into business history and corporate accountability, give us a like, hit subscribe, and ring the bell so you won't miss the next one. Anyways guys, as always, thank you so much for watching and stay curious.